Halloween is one of my favorite times of year. You get to dress up sexy, drink everything in sight, and test your body's ability to endure the biggest sugar crash of the year. Still, it's not as though it's all spooky skeletons and full moons. There's also spooky games to play. This video kicks off our short series of mysterious game reviews. Not that our game reviews aren't already mysterious, seeing as no one but me knows what the next one is until it uploads, but let me have this one, okay? Today's game is Dankest Dungeon, a dungeon crawling RPG with roguelike aspects such as permadeath. You'll take command of a party of 4 heroes as they delve into the darkness to take on unholy abominations, misshapen animal men, shivering slimes, and slippery fishmen. All of this because you inherited an estate from an old relative. Your relative mentions in his will that his explorations of the dungeons and catacombs near his estate open portals to dark dimensions, unleashing a flood of evil of which you must stem the tides. Grab your flashlights, kids. We're embarking on a journey into the Dankest Dungeon. If you ask anyone who's played Dankest Dungeon what the most defining aspect of the gameplay was, most of them will say that the gameplay is unforgiving or challenging. And so, this is Dankest Dungeon's most notable quirk. As I played through the game, I couldn't help but feel like it was always plotting against me, that I was one bad choice, one unfortunate critical hit, or one failed trap disarm from being forced to take drastic action. Each decision I made while playing felt like it carried with it an unfathomable burden, a sort of weight to every commitment that made it feel important. Another of Dankest Dungeon's major facets is its affliction system, which determines a hero's stress level. As they face the darkness and its shambling creations, they'll become more and more stressed until the resolve is tested. Sometimes your heroes will push through their stress and gain a positive quirk. Most times, however, they'll crack under the pressure and develop a negative quirk, which can negatively affect the rest of your group. If left untreated, both good and bad quirks can become permanent. Each hero can have several good and bad quirks, so long-term gameplay with successful heroes, you'll find that no two heroes will be the same. Stress management is an important aspect of the game, but after every quest, your heroes can have stress removed back in the hamlet by doing various activities. Having your heroes enter their next dungeon with minimal stress is one of the many things you need to do to avoid failure. As you progress through the game, you'll discover the ability to spend artifacts to increase the effectiveness of the hamlet's buildings, and that accrued gold can be used to unlock or upgrade hero skills, weapons, and armor. While I'd prefer the ability to discover new weapons and armor to equip my heroes while in dungeons, this at least negates the need to rifle through tons of loot to figure out what the best option is for each hero. Trinkets are items that can be earned from quests or found in dungeons, and each hero can equip a maximum of 2. Many of these trinkets are locked to specific classes of hero, offering them bonuses that usually build on their strengths. Later in the game, you can buy trinkets, though these are often so expensive that you'll probably never buy them. When you've prepared for your expedition by buying food, torches, and other necessities, and have chosen a dungeon and quest to pursue, you'll finally delve into the game's titular dungeons. You choose which rooms to aim for and deal with traps, obstacles, and enemies that might get in your way as you make your way between them. Most quests demand you scout out most of a dungeon's rooms or clear out a dungeon's enemies. Sometimes, one of your heroes will discover a map or scout ahead, symbolized by a ring that reveals the general contents of rooms and pathways between them. This allows you to prepare for traps or enemies in whatever way you deem necessary. These don't happen often, but the information these events give you is so valuable that you'll appreciate it every time it occurs. In longer dungeons, you're given the ability to camp at a time of your choosing. This allows you to heal allies, reduce their stress, or cure their ailments. This feature makes these tedious dungeons much easier to handle, especially with the proper timing. Each hero class brings unique skills to camping, so there's some extra layer of strategy later in the game to choosing which kinds of heroes can come with you. Finally, and perhaps the most welcome aspect of the game, Dankest Dungeon has Steam Workshop integrated into it, allowing you to download and install modifications. These can range from minimally intrusive, such as female-male sprites for traditionally female-male heroes, to extremely invasive, like complete game overhauls or new classes and monsters. If you're looking for a way to increase the game's longevity or to give it more variety, this is definitely the way to go. Dankest Dungeon is a unique game with a cool aesthetic. Each monster, dungeon, and hero was crafted in a way that allows them to fit perfectly within the game's world, and if you're a fan of the eldritch or of lovecraftian themes, you'll find a lot to love here. For example, enemy spellcasters will cast spells that summon a tentacle from a dark portal to push or pull a hero out of position, or summon dark whisperings to increase a hero's stress levels. The music is good, but while I enjoyed the tracks, it suffered from that issue a lot of games have of being forgettable. On the other hand, many of the game's sound effects were done well, and felt like they had real weight behind them. Attacks sliced and crushed properly, while things like healing spells had an arcane tingle to them. I wouldn't normally make mention of a game's narration, but in this case, it's spectacular. Not only does it serve to help fill out the game's lore, it also adds ambiance. In the several hours of gameplay I put into the game, I never got tired of listening to John Goodman's soothing voice informing me about what was going on in the game.
Prodigious size alone does not dissuade the sharpened blade. A handsome reward for a task well performed.
Here's where the pendulum begins to swing the other way. For starters, one of Dankest Dungeon's strengths as a game, its steep difficulty curve, is also one of its biggest weaknesses. You need to have a penchant for punishment bordering on the masochistic to play the game on its normal mode, and that's not even counting the more difficult Stygian mode, which gives you a time and death limit and, if you fail, it deletes your saved game. Brutal and unforgiving, but at least you know what you're getting into before you start. Even the easiest mode, Radiant mode, can be difficult. This is a very steep barrier for entry, deterring the easily frustrated are those who shy away from challenge. While the game considers itself a roguelike, it has one of the aspects of roguelike games that I think needs to go away sooner rather than later: permadeath. It's not uncommon to make mistakes in Dankest Dungeon that leads to hero death, or at least puts them on death's doorstep. When they die, that's it, they're gone forever. Hero mortality gives the player no reason to change the names of heroes or grow attached to them, because a single misstep, especially in the harder gameplay modes, can mean losing them. Even game series notorious for permadeath, like Fire Emblem, have incorporated the ability to turn off permadeath. This game should as well, or at the very least, allow Radiant mode players the option to do so. The affliction system feels unfair at times, because unless your hero is a seasoned veteran to dungeon diving, everything seems to cause hero stress. Couple that with enemies that do very little more than stack stress onto heroes, and it's pretty common to see heroes break several times a dungeon, and while the game says it can happen, heroes can get stressed out enough that they'll die as a result. I've never had this happen before, but it's a real threat in longer dungeons. You can heal stress mid-dungeon, but these occurrences are infrequent and often remove stress in negligible amounts. It's pretty obvious that the lack of mid-game stress management was done to encourage players to spend gold in town to heal large amounts of stress instead. Next, party diversity feels as though it's discouraged. I saw very little reason to use the game's several other hero classes, even though the opportunity presented itself on several occasions. Each party pretty much demands you have a tank and a healer for at least a minimal chance of success, otherwise even short quests become dangerous expeditions. You can fill out the last 2 slots however you wish, but I saw no reason to experiment outside of extra DPS / off-tank heroes in the 3rd slot, and a ranged attacker / debuffer in the 4th slot. While this game has plenty of hero class diversity, and there's a lot of great skills for each of them, the game encourages specialization and doesn't often support the ability to hybridize. Speaking of success, the game practically demands success from you. A lack of success means a lack of gold, and each failure means hero death are large stress gains that you don't have the gold to remove. This means you have to rely a lot on the stagecoach to gain new heroes, and a lack of good heroes means less chances of success. The game warns you every time you first start the game that Dankest Dungeon is all about making the most of bad situations, but it's tough to make the most of bad situations when every choice you have simply makes the situation worse. Curios, interactable objects within dungeons, and traps are often nearly impossible to see, blending in with the background or foreground elements. Traps seem to require you to spot them and click on them before you get too close for a chance to disarm them. The game insists that some hero classes are better at disarming curios and traps, but of all the hero classes I sent to disarm these things, it seemed like they all suffered a similar success or failure rate. Seeing as both curios and traps can deal damage to your party, cause them undue stress, and put debuffs and status effects on them, being able to see them a bit easier would be a definite benefit. Or at least having hero classes with disarming benefits have these advantages more transparent would be nice, so I could better weigh a hero's advantages against other heroes. Another aspect of the game that I found confusing was the torchlight system. As you travel through dungeons, your torchlight dwindles until it eventually goes out. You can increase your light levels by using torches or certain in-game skills. The game implies that things get more difficult when torchlight is low or out, but I honestly couldn't tell the difference. Even then, I still took the game's word for it and kept my torchlight at a decent level in case I was wrong. Traversing dungeons can be pretty slow, but this is accentuated by the fact that maps are often laid out in a manner that there's no real efficient way to travel through them. Oftentimes you'll be walking through safe areas you've cleared out already, and it's a slow crawl. While this isn't a huge issue, some sort of fast travel, auto move, or movement speed up through safe areas would have been beneficial. Instead, you have to choose each adjacent room and travel between each of them, regardless of how safe it might be. This can mean long treks to one corner of the dungeon, then long treks back to where you started. Needless to say, it's a big waste of time. Speaking of slow, the game is fairly tedious, and I realized several hours in that I'd basically been doing the same thing over and over again, with no real deviation from the norm. I chose the same heroes because they were the most effective. I went to the same dungeons, fought the same enemies, had the same things happen. For the first handful of hours, the game is spectacular, especially when everything is brand new. Get far enough into the game and you'll find that it's about as deep as an ocean and as wide as a puddle, which I suppose is fitting for a game with Lovecraftian themes. I could forgive these things, from genuine criticisms to nitpicks, if the game wasn't so stressful to play. When I sit down for a video game, I do so to relax and unwind, regardless of what the game is. Dankest Dungeon puts a burden on you with every decision you make. It's the first game that I've played in a long time that I didn't feel compelled to play in long stretches. I'd often play a few runs, lasting about a little under an hour, and then turn it off to go do something else. Dankest Dungeon sits on this weird middle ground. It's a good game with great narration and cool aesthetics, but it's tough to recommend it to any one group of people due to its steep challenge even on its lowest difficulties. If its flaws and challenge don't dissuade you from considering a purchase, it's currently $25 on Steam and has gone down as low as $10 during sales, which is a very reasonable price for the base content. And while the game does have DLC, you'll probably get way more out of customizing your game through the Steam Workshop. There it is, guys and ghouls. If you're not too scared, hit that subscribe button. Then join us for a frighteningly good time on Minds, Twitter, and Twitch. Links to all three will be in the description. Scare you later.